Africa is going through a metamorphosis or transformation. Its politics is changing, and so are the people who lead the countries in the continent. You see, some nations have been ruled by one person for years and even decades, and for them switching to the new era will obviously take some time. Angola is the latest nation to fall into that line. I will tell you what I mean shortly. This is World of Africa. I'm Erik Njoka. Welcome to the program. Let's start with what's happening in Africa. Suspected Boko Haram militants using guns and explosives blasted their way into a prison near Nigeria's capital, fleeing dozens of their jailed comrades and hundreds of other inmates. The brazen attack on the outskirts of Abuja is a startling illustration of Nigeria's security challenges. Several inmates were recaptured after the incident. The head of Burkina Faso's ruling junta, Paul Henry Sandaogo Damiba, speaking alongside ex-presidents Blaise Compaoré and Jean-Baptiste, has called for social cohesion to face rebel violence plaguing the nation. Compaoré's return home for the first time in 8 years to attend the summit has drawn widespread criticism. In April, he was assassinated in absentia to life in prison for his role in the assassination of his predecessor, Thomas Sankara. The Kenyan government and the World Health Organization have launched a medical emergency hub in Nairobi. The first in a network of African centers, they say, will hasten responses to regional emergencies. The facility will include a training center, stockpiles of medical equipment, and house professionals who can respond to a medical emergency within its first 24 hours. Jose Eduardo dos Santos, who ruled Angola for nearly 4 decades, winning a brutal civil war and overseeing an oil-fueled boom that did little to alleviate poverty, died at the age of 79. Known within his party as the architect of peace, the quietly spoken dos Santos saw his legacy increasingly tarnished by allegations of rampant corruption and nepotism, particularly after fighting ended in the southwest African country in 2002. What does the fall of this leader who ruled Angola for 38 years mean for the country? And why does his legacy draw divided opinion? Here's a brief look at the life of the once accidental president. This is the hospital in Barcelona, Spain, where the Angolan president, Jose Eduardo dos Santos, breathed his last. Residents of Angola's capital, Luanda, reacted to the death of a man who ruled the country with an iron fist for 38 years.
The death of Jose Eduardo dos Santos was shocking for everyone. He was an impeccable nationalist. He contributed a lot to the country, so we have to bear the pain. He contributed a lot not only to Angola, but to foreign countries as well.
I think he made a lot of positive changes for Angola. He changed a lot of things in the country, and I have good memories of him. These days, we are always listening about the bad things he did, but I really think he did it all for the best.
He frequently described himself as an accidental president, taking the reins after Angola's first leader, Agostinho Neto, died during cancer surgery in 1979. Born in 1942 to immigrant parents from the archipelago of Sao Tome, dos Santos had grand ambitions and joined the then nascent People's Movement for the Liberation of Angola, MPLA. Like many of his fellow liberation fighters, he spent his early 20s in exile in the Republic of Congo before moving to Baku in Azerbaijan. Then, Baku was part of the Soviet Union. He went there to study petroleum engineering. There, he met his first wife, Tatiana Kukanova, a Russian chess champion with whom he had his first and most famous daughter, Isabel. By 1977 and the death of Neto, dos Santos was among half a dozen senior MPLA members with a shot at the leadership. He won partly because he seemed like the weakest candidate. Although he would increasingly be regarded by his critics as a dictator, it was his apparent willingness to compromise and stand by election results in 1992 as part of a UN negotiated peace process that would seal the popularity of his party. Between 2002 and 2014, As oil production grew in tandem with booming prices, the size of Angola's economy multiplied by 10, from $12.4 billion to $126 billion. Long regarded as untouchable, Angolans were shocked when he stepped down before an election in 2017. And even more so when his hand-picked successor, João Lourenço, turned on him, going on an anti-corruption campaign that would land Dos Santos' son in jail. His eldest daughter, Isabel, became, according to Forbes, Africa's richest woman and youngest billionaire, worth about $3 billion. Forbes has since dropped Isabel from its list of billionaires because of the asset freezes. Dos Santos once said he would like to be remembered as a good patriot. He, however, never specifically responded to allegations that he had allowed corruption to become rampant. Isabel suspects foul play and has asked for a post-mortem to ascertain her father's cause of death. A Spanish court has also ruled that an autopsy should be performed on the body of the late former president. Hundreds took to the streets of Ghana's capital Accra last week to protest over its deteriorating economy. Days later, the government of one of West Africa's most prosperous nations announced it would begin formal talks with the International Monetary Fund for support. It was a decision many analysts long thought inevitable, despite repeated pledges from Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta to never again seek IMF assistance. Why did the country reverse course? And what could the IMF demand in return? Let's find out.
This was Accra, Ghana, in the first week of July. Ghanaians are infuriated by the dwindling economy. There's no food and fuel, and the currency cedi is crumbling due to rising inflation. Inflation hit an 18-year high of 27.6% in May, topping a year of accelerating prices. Growth slowed to 3.3% in the first quarter, and the value of the cedi has declined 23.5% against the dollar since the year began. The President Nana Akufo-Addo claims the contrary. He says the economy has begun to firm up and the cedi has systematically appreciated against the dollar. The pandemic, just like the rest of the world, has dented Ghana's growth. Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta told lawmakers last month that pandemic-related expenditure amounted to 18.19 billion cedis, or $2.26 billion, as of May 2022. The country received $1.23 billion in COVID-19 relief funding from the IMF and World Bank over that period. Prices of imported goods rose more than domestically produced ones for the second month in a row in May, including cereals, 20% of which Ghana imports from Russia, having repeatedly seen some of the largest price hikes. Petroleum prices have nearly doubled year on year. Authorities were still unsure about seeking IMF support only 2 weeks ago, but found their hands tied after lawmakers stalled a $1 billion loan and an unpopular electronic payments tax meant to generate revenues underperformed. Authorities hope an IMF program would relieve Ghana's nearly $1 billion balance of payments deficit, which Central Bank Governor Ernest Addison said may result from capital exodus caused by global factors. But experts say the root of Ghana's problem is likely fiscal, as it utilizes continuously greater loans to plug its double-digit fiscal deficit. The Finance Ministry's plan for amortizing that debt rests squarely with the IMF, which said it would help the country regain access to international capital markets and roll over existing debt after recent credit rating downgrades cooled lender interest. Many have questioned the sustainability of that strategy. The Finance Ministry figures show that interest payments have been the government's largest annual expense since 2019 and were its second largest expense for 5 straight years prior to that. While Ghana's Eurobonds rallied on the news the government would seek IMF help, yields for all but the issue maturing this year remain above 10%, the level seen as cutting a country off from issuing new debt as it becomes too expensive. When Ghana last sought IMF assistance in 2015, it received $918 million through an extended credit facility arrangement, equal to 180% of its quota. This time, Ghana has proposed its own enhanced domestic program to the IMF, which would last a minimum of 3 years. It remains to be seen if Africa's darling of the economy will regain its lost glory.
Blackouts are now becoming a menace in South Africa. The blackouts, called load shedding, leave residents without power 2 to 3 times per day, lasting 2 to 4 hours at a time. Residents are unable to turn on heaters, cook dinner, or even charge their phones. Here's a story on South Africa's dark days.
South Africans are spending their midwinter evenings plunged in darkness and low-tech living. Power outages, known here as load shedding, intensified late last month after strikes erupted at the nation's monopoly energy provider Eskom, leaving coal plants unable to operate or undergo maintenance. Electricity cuts in South Africa are a notorious, years-old problem, but the frequency of power losses, 2 to 3 times per day and lasting up to 4 hours at a time, is the worst since a bleak episode in December 2019, and many people are livid.
I see this being a very, very serious challenge. It's like we are back to the apartheid life, you know, whereby we now back to candles, paraffin stoves, gas and all those things.
Government should pull their socks up, remove themselves from Eskom, let Eskom being run independently. And Eskom should just do the right thing. Stop doing corruption, stop stealing, and just provide power, because that's what Eskom is for. It's a power utility company.
The leading economy on the continent, South Africa relies on coal to generate more than 80% of its electricity. The country has plenty of coal, but most of its plants are aging, need repair, or are scheduled to be decommissioned in the coming decades.
Our logistics system is anyway under pressure. This is probably on the margin of that. So we are trying everything we can to help and to smooth the logistics system, both rail, truck transport, as well as the harbour situation. And it is under strain, there's no doubt about it, but we have been able to manage it.
The wage dispute that compounded the crisis concluded with Eskom employees accepting a 7% increase. The public entity is already laden with debt and struggling to recover from years of alleged mismanagement and corruption, which made it a key entity investigated during a 4-year public inquiry into statecraft. In April, the company warned the country could see as many as 101 days of load shedding this year due to breakdowns.
You know, there's no life without electricity. Houses are cold. We don't cook. We've got to go buy food and all that if we don't have any other thing, any other resource to use.
The country's energy burden is only expected to grow in the coming years. Power demands could triple by 2040 as transportation and other industries move to electrification. Without rapid investment, load shedding will remain a fixture. This is Kalden Ongmo from Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, in a country where women are subjected to atrocious crimes like domestic violence and rape, and yet it is considered a too sensitive topic to discuss publicly. Nasreen Mohammed Ibrahim in Somalia is taking a lead and giving a voice to millions of such women. Bilan Media, a startup headed by Nasreen, is run by only female journalists and is helping women to speak up and share their stories.
Meet Nasreen Mohammed Ibrahim. At first glance, she may come across as an ordinary woman making videos on her mobile phone. But dig a little more into her story and the woman is no ordinary one. Nasreen, in fact, is on a mission along with her army of 6 other women journalists to break the silence around gender violence. Based in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu, a predominantly conservative Muslim country, Nasreen found her voice through Bilan Media. a startup run entirely by women to give voices to those women who've been subjected to issues like domestic violence and rape that are considered too sensitive for public broadcast in Somalia. Challenging the patriarchal norms, WION Media, funded by the United Nations Development Programme, operates out of the office of Daslan, a popular television and radio station.
At WION Media, we focus on stories that are crucial for the Somali communities we live in. They are stories of things that people see as normal, but these are things that are not investigated properly. If it were to be investigated and broadcasted, then we might find solutions for the future.
A country where a crime like rape remains rampant, bills that protect women like the First Sexual Offences Act is yet to be passed. And that makes it even more challenging for women to come out and speak up about the atrocities they've been facing. But here's how an all-female team helps, which has proved to be an unexpected advantage where women feel safer sharing their pain, which they may not be able to do in front of male journalists.
As Somali female journalists, we encourage and advocate for the rights of the voiceless women.
It is a great startup for society, especially for women. It tries to cover the needs of women because it gives voice to the voiceless and focuses on the stories of vulnerable women. I think that's really important right now.
In a society where perpetrators often get away and the victims face backlash, WION Media seems to be lending a helping hand by giving a voice to women who are often suppressed and ostracized.
Have you ever asked yourself what it means to be African? Or have you ever heard of the term Afrocentrism? It could be a forgotten practice for many in Africa, but not for Kenya's children in Freedom School. Here, Afrocentrism is a part of their curriculum, where students practice their ethnic roots to preserve their cultural heritage. Take a look.
Afrocentrism means Africa-centered, that Africa is at the center and at the heart. Black people, black culture is at the center and at the heart.
Afrocentrism is what this school in Kenya is teaching its students. To embrace and preserve one's culture, ethnicity and language and pass it on to the future generations. That's the aim of Children in Freedom School in Kenya's Nakuru.
We are bringing it back to, or we are opening it up again because a lot of cultures have come and overridden our own cultures. So to be Afrocentric means to purposively and consciously go back to the African culture and agenda.
As the students walk into their classrooms in their colourful attires, signifying their cultural heritage, it is not just a rare, beautiful sight to look at, but it is also a reminder of the diverse African culture amalgamated into one. Students are encouraged to learn their respective mother tongues with an additional local dialect.
The reason we edify our mother tongue, our African colours and prints, African attire, is because this is who we are. Our culture carries our heart, our soul, our mind, our essence. First, we should start with our own mother tongue, our own colors, dressing code, everything, our own Afrocentrism, Africa-centeredness, and then we add.
With Afrocentrism curriculum practiced in the school, students are taught about their origin of culture and its history. Allowing them to use their traditional names and their traditional attires is making the students and the society more accepting and encouraging towards each of their ethnicities.
This school is an African-centered school. It is trying to change the African mindset and make the Africans love themselves, know who they are, and just be proud and be ready to embrace their culture. But in my other school, it was very hard for someone to be called with their African name because people thought that the African names are not valuable. They really admired the European culture and failed to admire our own culture.
This school has helped shape my Africanism by making me embrace my African name, making me love my African name, making me wear my African attire, basically letting us embrace to the world our culture.
For parents of these students, Afrocentrism is a way to teach the children about their culture, which they find difficult to do.
Growing up as an African child, we grew up communicating with our elders in the vernacular languages, dressing in the cultural way that was fit for everybody. With westernization, the culture, African culture is being eroded, and with the modern parents being busy with so many things, with education and with the work, we tended to forget about teaching our children about their culture. And we are so excited that Children in Freedom has taken it up to teach our children about their culture in terms of dressing and even the cultural foods and speaking vernacular language.
While a majority of African schools follow the norm of school uniforms worn in the West, Children in Freedom School, by accepting the unique practice of Afrocentrism, is giving the students a freedom to accept and create their own unique identity.
The art of filigree. This is where beads and threads of the precious materials are woven into intricate designs, then soldered together to create jewellery. This traditional ornament creation is making a return to Libya, making many residents elated about the revival. Here now is a report from the capital, Tripoli.
Abdel Majid Zeglem is just 12 years old, but his minutely detailed creations are already selling fast on the streets around a Roman-era archway in downtown Tripoli.
At the beginning, I was scared I would fail because I'm too young, but my mother encouraged me.
Zeglem is a part of young Libyans weaving delicate patterns with threads of silver and gold to create traditional filigree jewellery. Reviving an art almost lost through decades of dictatorship and war.
Around 1983 or 1984, even the state was against craftsmen. It undermined traditional crafts and took part in destroying our work, enrolled in the army, and some changed their profession.
A group of 20 or so students, around half of them female, are studying at the Libyan Academy for Traditional Gold and Silver Crafts, in a building that once served as a French consulate to the Ottoman Empire. Trainees learn about precious metal alloys before studying the art of filigree, in which beads and threads of the precious materials are woven into intricate designs and then soldered together to create jewellery.
At the moment it's a hobby, but God willing in the future I could turn it into a career.
Student Fatima Boswa hit out at the practice of selling old Libyan silver jewellery at cheap prices to be exported and then melted down. A dentist in her 40s who also teaches at the University of Tripoli, Boswa has been training at the centre for the past year, hoping to master the craft.
I wish that we could at least have Libyan craftsmen to preserve our Libyan heritage. It's really upsetting not to have anyone to support it.
Generations of tradition were abruptly halted after Gaddafi took power in a 1969 coup. The ruler scrapped the private sector, seizing companies and confiscating their assets. Overnight, self-employed artisans lost everything: their workshops, their livelihoods, and their students. But now, most see light at the end of the tunnel.
And it's a wrap on this week's episode of World of Africa. Be part of the show and tell us what you'd want to watch in our future shows. Until next week, my name is Erik Njoka. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.